All right, you're going to want to hear this because something just went down at Mobile World Congress that could seriously shake up the entire smartphone world. We're talking about a partnership that, well, pretty much nobody saw coming, and it's a huge, huge deal for anyone who cares about privacy and security. So let's just dive right in. For the very first time, a major household name in phones is officially partnering with a hardcore, privacy-first operating system. This is no longer just some niche project for tech enthusiasts. This is privacy going mainstream, and it might just give us all a real choice that isn't just Apple or Google. So what exactly happened? Well, this is the story of a landmark moment, really. It's about how a nonprofit open-source project, one that's been loved by security experts for years, suddenly landed a massive industry partner. So, picture this. Mobile World Congress, one of the biggest tech shows on the planet. Out of nowhere, Motorola announces a long-term partnership with the GrapheneOS Foundation. And their goal, in their own words, is to bring cutting-edge security to everyday users. And this isn't just a one-off thing. They're talking about a real collaboration on future devices for years to come. Okay, so we all know Motorola. But you might be asking yourself, who or what is GrapheneOS? And that's a fair question. To really get why this is such a game changer, you have to understand what these guys are all about. So GrapheneOS is this awesome nonprofit project. They take the basic open source building blocks of Android, what the pros call ASP, and they basically rebuild it from the ground up with a hardcore, relentless focus on security and privacy. Think of it like taking the engine of a car and reinforcing every single part to make it into a secure fortress on wheels. And when you put it side by side with a regular Android, the difference is just wow. On standard Android, your data is pretty much controlled by the company. On GrapheneOS, you're in the driver's seat. The sandbox that apps run in is way more fortified, so apps can't snoop on each other or your data. And here's the biggest kicker. Google's services are not baked into the core of the system. They're totally optional, and if you do decide to use them, they're trapped inside that secure sandbox where they can't see anything else. As you can imagine, this news just lit up the tech community. This comment from Hacker News, which got picked up by ZDNet, really nails the excitement. People feel like the market is just begging for something new, and the idea is that by embracing this open approach, Motorola could really steal a huge piece of the pie. Okay, so the hype is real, but what are the actual nuts and bolts of this deal? Let's get down to the specifics, right? What, when, and how is this all going to work? First up, the timeline. You can't go out and buy one of these tomorrow. The first devices are slated for 2027. Now, why the wait? It's because GrapheneOS has incredibly high standards for hardware security. They need things like advanced memory tagging to stop certain kinds of cyber attacks, and Motorola's current phones just aren't there yet. So they're building that capability into their next generation of hardware. So let's break down the key facts. We're looking at a 2027 launch, and this will be for Motorola's high-end flagship phones. You know, the Signature Series, the Razr foldables. They're promising a solid 5 years of security updates, but they're shooting for 7, which is amazing. And this is really important. It's a non-exclusive deal. That means GrapheneOS is totally free to work with other phone makers down the line. And we've got to be super clear on a few things here to manage expectations. GrapheneOS is not building a brand new phone from scratch. This isn't the Graphene phone. What they are doing is providing their deep security expertise to help Motorola engineer their existing flagship phones to meet those super high standards. And no, Motorola isn't ditching Android everywhere. This will be a special, secure option for customers who want it. This all sounds fantastic, right? But it begs a really big question. Why now? What was the catalyst? What finally pushed a niche security project and a global giant like Motorola to team up? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating. So for the GrapheneOS team, getting a hardware partner was always a long-term goal. But it really seems like the timeline got a serious kick in the pants because of a major and very public problem they had with, you guessed it, Google. So here's the story. When Android 16 came out, Google released the general source code, but they held back the specific code needed for their own Pixel 10 phones. And since GrapheneOS officially supports Pixels, their team was just stuck. They couldn't push out a stable finished version for the newest phones. This whole mess made the massive risk of being totally dependent on one company for your code crystal clear. It showed them they needed a true partner. So what's in it for Motorola? Oh, this is a brilliant strategic move. It's all about cracking the big money business-to-business or B2B market. See, right now, a lot of big companies only give their employees iPhones because of security. By offering phones with GrapheneOS pre-installed, Motorola can now walk into those same companies and offer a super secure Android alternative. It's a powerful new weapon to compete against Apple in the corporate world. Okay, so we've covered the what, the when, and the why of this whole deal. But the most important question is, what does this actually mean for you, the person who might be looking for a new phone in a year or two? Of course, with any huge tech partnership like this, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. While everyone is super excited, some smart users have pointed out a few potential concerns we should definitely talk about. First, Motorola is owned by Lenovo, which is a Chinese company. For some users who are worried about state-level threats, that ownership raises some questions. Second, like we said, GrapheneOS isn't designing the hardware. So if you were hoping for things like physical kill switches or removable batteries, that's not part of this deal. And finally, the big unknown. Will the average person on the street actually care enough about privacy to choose this kind of phone? So let's get practical. If you're using GrapheneOS now, or you're thinking about it, what's the move? Well, if you're on a newer phone, say a Pixel 8 or newer, the general advice is to just wait. You've already got great hardware security, just see what Motorola comes up with in 2027. But if you're on an older phone, like a Pixel 6a or 7, you might want to think about upgrading to a newer Pixel soon just to get those key security features, especially since your phone might stop getting updates before these Motorola phones even hit the shelves. And all of this brings us to the ultimate million-dollar question at the heart of this story. For years, real, deep digital privacy has been kind of a niche thing, right? For experts and hobbyists. This partnership between Motorola and GrapheneOS is the biggest test we've ever seen to find out if privacy is finally ready to become a mainstream feature that people will actually pay for. And you can bet we'll all be watching very, very closely to see what happens.